So welcome everyone. Welcome to the first webinar of Koç University Center for Asian Studies webinar series for the fall 2020 semester. Today's talk will be given by Veysel Tekdal from the Department of International Relations at Eskişehir Osmangazi University. The title of his talk, Veysel earned his Ph.D. degree from the program of Area Studies at Middle East Technical University this year, actually. He is currently working as a research assistant at Eskişehir Osmangazi University. Tekdal was trained at National Chengchi University, Taipei, and Tsinghua University in Beijing. His research focuses on global political economy, Chinese political economy, and Chinese foreign policy. He published a paper in the Pacific Review and a book chapter in this edited volume, Çin Bilmecesi, published by Koç University Press. Welcome, Veysel, and floor is yours.
Thank you. Hi everyone. Thank you for joining me here. And I'd like to thank two directors of the Koç University Asian Center, Burak Gürel and Ayakü Tavkici Demirci. And the presentation I'm going to make is based on my dissertation that I submitted to Area Studies Department at the Middle East Technical University. And I conducted this research with the supervision of Ceren Ergenç and Derya Göçer. And let me show the content of my presentation. I will start with some background notes on the regional disparity and industrial change in China. Then I will introduce the puzzle that my research is addressing. Basically, I will try to show I will share some facts and figures regarding industrial transformation performances of some cities in Western China. Some are successful cases, some are more like mediocre cases, or we might call them as failure in terms of their performance in industrial upgrading. Then I will move to unpack the factors that contributed to success and failure in these cities. Basically China has four macro regions: Northeast China, Northeast region, Western region, Eastern region, and Central region. During the reform era, Eastern China and regional disparity between Eastern China and the other regions has widened significantly, especially in the early decades of the reform era in 1980s, 1990s. And now as you can see from here, annual per capita income in Eastern China is much ahead of the income level in other regions. Yet, starting from the mid-2000s, regional disparity between Eastern China and the rest has been somewhat narrowing. There is no huge narrowing down, but somewhat narrowing. I mean, the regional disparity in China has been somewhat narrowing since the mid-2000s. And as you know, China has recorded a surprising success in economic transformation in a short span of time. And we can say that China's success owes much to its structural upgrading, or its shift from resource-based and low-tech manufacturing to mid and high-tech manufacturing. However, this industrial upgrading has been dramatically uneven across China's provinces. Broadly speaking, we can say coastal provinces have specialized in advanced industries, while the most of inland provinces continue to rest on raw material intensive and low-tech industries like metal smelting and pressing, non-metal mineral products, food processing, etc. And as I said, since mid-2000s, regional disparities in China have been narrowing down, and we might identify two particular processes behind this narrowing down of regional disparity. First of all, central government started some regional development programs. The first one of that programs was Western Development Program, which was started in 2000. You know, it's a long-term and quite comprehensive development program and includes some policies, some measures like preferential tax arrangements, fiscal transfers, subsidized loans, and infrastructural investments, and so on. Another process that contributed to accelerated growth in lagging regions in Western China in particular is the industrial transfer or industrial migration from coastal China, eastern region to inland regions. Because of the surging labor and land cost in the eastern region, more and more enterprises opted for transferring some of their manufacturing plants to inland regions, including Western China. However, perhaps unsurprisingly, the performances of the cities in Western China in terms of attracting investment, in terms of achieving high growth rates differ, and we can surely identify Chongqing, Chengdu, and Xi'an as quite successful cases in terms of their growth rates, as well as their success in attracting industrial investments in high-tech sectors. Guiyang as well is a success story. In certain senses, we can say that Guiyang is a relative success story, but in some aspects, Guiyang is clearly a success story. On the other hand, there are many cities like Lanzhou, which largely failed to promote or trigger industrial upgrading. As you can see from here, from the table, the Chongqing, Chengdu, and Xi'an are quite large cities, while Lanzhou and Guiyang can be seen as middle-scale cities in Western China. Now I'd like to share some facts and figures regarding successful cases. Chongqing, in a short span of time, has managed to develop some, high-tech industries. In 2008, top industries in the city, for instance, included electric power and hot power production and supply, transportation equipment, raw chemical materials and chemical products, etc. This kind of raw material intensive industries were the leading sectors in Chongqing in 2008. In a short span of time, communication equipment, computer and other electronic equipment industry joined the pillar industries of Chongqing, and also motor vehicles industry occupy an important place in Chongqing's current industrial structure. A similar change happened in Chengdu. Now computer and communications and other electronic equipment industry is the largest one in Chengdu. And again, a similar transformation in Xi'an. Motor vehicles, electronic equipment and transportation equipment, together with electric equipment and machinery, are leading sectors in Xi'an, and previously important sectors in Xi'an, such as chemical materials, metallurgy, and agricultural product industries, have receded to a sort of secondary importance in the city. And also we can have a look to their performances in FDI inflow, as well as their exports since the mid-2000s to mid-2010s. And all three cities attracted huge amount of FDI starting from the mid to late 2000s. And similarly, they increased their ties with global markets, and now their export volumes are clearly much more bigger than their export figures in 2000, in the early 2000s. Now I am moving to compare Lanzhou and Guiyang as mid-sized cities. We might start with looking at growth rates of Lanzhou and Guiyang. Guiyang, in terms of growth rates, Guiyang is an high achiever. Its growth rate for the period of 2001 to 2016 was clearly ahead of China national average. Lanzhou's growth performance is not bad at all, I would say. However, it's a bit behind China's national average. Yet the problem with Lanzhou is not the growth rate, but the sustainability and the quality of that growth. By the way, these figures are calculated by using current prices. If we deflate them to get real ones, probably it will be, these figures will be 1 or 2% smaller. And another aspect that Guiyang appears as an high achiever is its FDI attraction compared to other middle-sized cities in Western China, such as Lanzhou and Urumqi. It is, the volume of FDI that Guiyang attracted is much higher than the inward FDI figures in Guiyang and in Urumqi and Lanzhou, sorry. And Lanzhou is extremely successful, in attracting FDI. We might also compare shift towards relatively advanced sectors in Lanzhou and Guiyang. Guiyang is still, dependent on the raw material intensive industries. They still have an important place in the city's industrial structure. On the other hand, we can say that these relatively advanced industries gained a momentum in the city, and they now gained a foothold in the city. On the other hand, the value added of these industries in Lanzhou, with the exception of pharmaceutical manufacturing, is quite low. Like they have a quite negligible presence in Lanzhou. In support of this, I like to share high-tech value added in Guiyang and Gansu. I collided these figures from the statistical yearbooks of Guiyang and Gansu. Gansu is the province that Lanzhou is a part of, and Lanzhou is the capital of. And Lanzhou's statistical yearbooks don't have such item. For that reason, I compare high-tech value added of Guiyang with whole Gansu province. Even doing so, high-tech value added in Guiyang is 2 times larger than that of Gansu province as a whole, if you compare, for instance, 2015 figures. And another thing we can infer from this table is that high-tech value added high-tech industries in Guiyang gain a stable growth momentum. Now I'm gonna share some details about the growth sources in Lanzhou. As I shared, its growth rates for 2000s and the early 2010s were not so low. On the other hand, there are some problems with the sources of this growth in Lanzhou. First of all, we can identify that expansion of traditional raw material intensive industries contributed significantly to growth rates in Lanzhou. Most of them recorded quite high growth rates from mid-2000s to so until 2013, 2014, depending on the industry. However, these industries have grim growth prospects in mid to long term because they stand among the industries with highest overcapacity. And also, as you can see from the figures of 2015 and 16, they experienced some contraction during those years. Of course, Lanzhou government was aware of that problem, and sort of as a response, it was aiming to foster some new advanced manufacturing industries, like new materials, equipment manufacturing, and pharmaceutical industries. They achieved some success in pharmaceutical industries, but for others, the current record of Lanzhou is not so much optimistic, too much optimistic. And Lanzhou indeed got a favor from central government in 2012, and Lanzhou new area was announced in 2012 and approved by State Council. And these new areas are designated for high-tech manufacturing, especially. And at that time, I mean, in 2012, there were only 4 other new areas in China. So Lanzhou was lucky to get a new area as early as 2012. However, as we see, Lanzhou new area is not so much successful in becoming a hub of advanced manufacturing. Also, I'd like to underline some other growth sources in Lanzhou. I prefer calling them contingent growth sources. For instance, petroleum processing is, strongly correlated with the manufacturing value added. Blue line shows the value added of petroleum processing, and orange one shows the total manufacturing value added. And there's a strong correlation between them, showing the city's dependence, Lanzhou's dependence on the petroleum industry. And these ups and downs is related with the price fluctuations in petroleum products. I checked the output volumes. There was no significant output changes during those years. And also we know that during the early 2000s, petroleum prices were increasing globally, and Lanzhou again was lucky to have such an new and unexpected growth source. Another contingent growth source in Lanzhou was the construction industry. Construction industry in Lanzhou, even in the mid 2000s, the share of construction in gross regional product was higher than China's national average. It was understandable, Lanzhou is located in a lagging region, and central government was offering some preferential loans and encouraging infrastructural investments, etc. So it was quite understandable, this relatively high share in mid to late 2000s. However, as you know, China adopted a series of stimulus packages after the 2008 global economic crisis as a response to stagnating effects of the crisis. And because of these stimulus packages, because of these cheap loans and encouragement from the central government, Lanzhou initiated new construction projects, and the share of construction since 2009 remained over, climbed to 11th and even 12%. This was another contingent growth source in Lanzhou. Here one may ask whether a service-led growth model is a viable route for Lanzhou. Indeed, we can say that services industries in Lanzhou experience a good growth rate from mid-2000s to mid-2010s. On the other hand, I would argue that a service-led growth with the current structure of service industry in Lanzhou is not a viable route. Its capacity to induce convergence highly dubious, I argue. Because the largest service industries in Lanzhou include quite traditional service industries like retail, accommodation and catering, education, and public services. When we look at the service-led catch-up experiences in China or beyond, we usually see that some other, like more highly productive, more tradable industries have played a prominent role. Examples to these kind of productive and tradable service industries are software development, telecommunications, finance, insurance, and business services. You know, India is not usually, but sometimes cited as an instance, as an example of service-led catch-up country. And also we know that some cities in China which experience an economic revival through this kind of productive and tradable service industries. We know Dalian, for instance, from Northeast China. It was an heavy industrial based during the Mao's period, but it achieved a revival through some new industries, new and productive service industries like software development and IT. And in Guiyang, we also see an impressive development of big data industry. I will talk more about this big data development in Guiyang. Now I'm moving to unpack the factors that contributed to success and failure. And here I like to share my analytical framework. Let me. You know, in China, we can say that there are, two fundamental dimensions of local development, local level factors and central level factors. And within the existing literature, we have a great work done by Jia Ho-chung. He and his collaborators published a book in which they compare cities' economic transformation stories, and they suggest an analytical framework. According to this analytical framework, we can divide, factors that may affect developmental trajectories in cities into three groups. First, set of factors relate to national conditions and historical legacy. By the way, I used that framework, but I expanded the framework by engaging with some other strands of literature. And natural conditions are, conditions include location, topography, and climate. And historical legacy refers to legacies of the past. They might be the inherited industrial structure from Mao's period, or they might refer to some economic or social traditions in the localities. We also have central government policies or central level factors. First of all, central government has the authority leverage over localities in many respects, and for instance, the central government can confer, can grant special administrative power to localities, like special economic zones. Also, central government can extend financial support to localities in the form of fiscal transfers or in the form of loans, subsidized loans. Another leverage of central government over the localities is its choice for personnel appointments. You know, there are some strong if the central government wants to support a locality, it can send some strong figures to this locality as a party secretary, as a mayor, or as a governor. And finally, I would say macroeconomic policies also favor sometimes some regions and some industries over others. And finally, we have policies of the local leadership, and the policy options at the hands of local leadership is quite a few. And for my subject, for industrial upgrading, I particularly like to underline two policies of the local leadership. They could pioneer, they could trigger development of new sectors through some targeted policies like provision of land, tax reductions, public procurement schemes. Even we see some examples in which local government provides venture capital for the sake of pioneering new sectors. And they also, of course, are expected to actively pursue some investments from wealthier parts of China or from abroad. Now I am going to discuss factors contributed to success in large cities. Most of them are based on the review of the literature. There are some literature on the large cities in Western China, Chengdu, Chongqing, and Xi'an, and they commonly point to the role of historical legacy. They, even during the Mao era, they already had some capacity in electronic and motor vehicle sectors. And of course, they are larger, they are quite large cities, and they have large markets and large pools of labor. And we can also underline this, the role of central government policies. I think we can surely say that central government gave the priority to these cities in the development of Western region. And if we compare, for instance, if we compare the 11th five-year plan for Western Development Program, the industrial supports listed in the plan was generally targeting these three large cities. However, when we compare the 11th five-year plan with the 12th five-year plan for WDP, we can say that the industrial supports listed in the 12th five-year plan are fairly more dispersed. And also, we can, when we check the party secretaries or governors of these three large cities over the past decade, we can say that they have had quite strong figures as party secretary or as governor, as mayor, etc. Especially Chongqing has had quite strong figures as the party secretary. But in Xi'an and Chengdu as well, there were some, party secretaries which prove themselves with, you know, their track record, their previous accomplishments. But I especially like to give some, you know, causal weight to the role of local leadership. And I prefer to call it proactive, the role of proactive and competent local leadership. It has some aspects, you know, the being a proactive and competent leadership. First of all, in those cities, we can say that the technical capacity, bureaucratic capacity was relatively high in those cities. They could identify the sectors to be supported, as well as the conditions needed for their development. You know, it's not an easy job to identify sectors. You need to make some, you know, previous studies to identify these sectors and identify necessary conditions to support them, to make them really work. And they mobilized resources to pioneer, to nurture these new sectors, and also they actively pursued extra local investments. I want to share a lengthy quote to show how important was the role of leadership, and this is a vivid example of the leadership. In 2009, Hewlett Packard, a globally leading notebook producer, was seeking new manufacturing bases, and they had some candidate cities in India, Malaysia, Indonesia, and some cities in China. Chongqing was not on the list. Yet, the municipal government adopted a proactive strategy, and the mayor of the municipal government visited HP's headquarters and offered very, favorable terms. Chongqing is a landlocked city, and to reduce this disadvantage, Chongqing government promised an international airport and the Chongqing Xinjiang Europe freight train as a way of improving national and international accessibility. And now famous, these China-Europe trains have become a famous aspect of Belt and Road Initiative. It was started by Chongqing municipal government in cooperation with Hewlett Packard. In Guiyang, Guiyang doesn't have certain advantages of the large cities, such as large pool of labor, large market, or a favorable inherited industrial legacy. So there are some other factors to underline here. Literature on Guiyang or writings, academic or media commentary on Guiyang largely focus on the development of big data industry in the city. Now, some leading multinational or national corporations have data centers in Guiyang, including Microsoft, Apple, Huawei, Tencent, etc. Behind the development of big data industry in Guiyang, we can identify the role of local leadership. Local government is praised in academic and media commentary in its determination to use Guiyang's advantages, such as cool climate, availability of low-cost energy, and relatively cheap land. On the other hand, there was a clear support of the government, central government, to support Guiyang's bid in big data industry. It was designated as a pilot center for big data industry in 2012, and Beijing appointed Chen Gang to Guiyang as party secretary from 2013 to 2017. This guy was previously the head of Zhongguancun Science Park in Beijing. Zhongguancun Science Park is often called as China's Silicon Valley. This was a big favor made by central government to Guiyang. Now I am moving to underachievement or failure in Lanzhou? Which factors contributed to underachievement there? First of all, I argue that the industrial legacy in Lanzhou and vested interest around these current industries, inherited industry, industrial structure, have created an industrial path that is highly resistant to renewal. These industries, these pillar industries such as petroleum processing, branches of metallurgy and tobacco, etc., absorb the city's industrial skills and capabilities such as land, human resources, governmental subsidies, and preferential loan provision. However, the local government had some rationale behind maintaining the old path and supporting the current pillar industries. You know, they provide large pools of employment. These industries provide large pools of employment, and their protection is important for the stability. So there is a kind of institutional dependence on the part of the government with major local companies. Most of them are, these sectors are dominated by state-controlled companies. And as a result, local governments support these industries through subsidies, public procurement, and some other informal protective measures. And one of my arguments regarding the failure in Lanzhou is that local leadership in Lanzhou was rather complacent and conservative. And I like to share some indicators about the performance of local leadership, but these indicators are not conclusive in terms of their performances. However, they are still telling. I compared the targets put in Lanzhou's 12 five-year plan with the realized figures. These targets are not compulsory. However, the gap between targets and the realized figures are huge. For instance, the target for gross regional product was to reach 250 billion yuan in 2015. However, the realized figure was slightly above the 200 billion yuan. And this appointment the gap between target and realized figure was even more striking in the case of Lanzhou New area. The realized gross regional product in Lanzhou New area was only a quarter of the target. Also, another striking feature of Lanzhou New area is that it lacks any significant inflow of FDI. I think the local government, equipped with some good advantages, has a new area and have the authority to extend some good preferential policies to investors. Despite these advantages, local government couldn't attract some, significant FDI into the new area. And there are some further evidence about the complacent and conservative leadership in Lanzhou. Media commentary, academic commentary usually underline the successful strategies of local leaders in Chongqing, Chengdu, and Guiyang and Xi'an. On the other hand, Lanzhou's local leadership is not associated with a successful economic transformation story, either by interviewees or in the media and academic commentary. On the contrary, there are some phrases I like to quote from academic work on Lanzhou's economic development. For instance, a researcher, by the way, she is a native of Lanzhou, and she identifies laziness and inaction of local authority as an important source of Lanzhou's mediocre economic performance. And some other researchers like He and Zhang, they are from Lanzhou University, and according to them, public policies' incapability to nurture a good business environment is an source of Lanzhou's mediocre economic performance. Apart from academic commentary, I was suggested by Burak Gürel to look at what Lanzhou residents think about their leaders. And I already had some, I made an fieldwork in Lanzhou for more than 50 days. And of course, I had some everyday conversations with residents in Lanzhou. And I already knew that, I already heard from a couple of people about their leaders, some negative comments about their leaders. But upon Burak Gürel's suggestion, I went to Jihu. Jihu is like an Quora-like web platform, and I looked for comments made on Lanzhou's economy, and numerous comments from Lanzhou residents underlined the short-sightedness or inertia of local government as a cause of Lanzhou's stagnant development. So, after making a review of statistics, sectoral data, the academic review of academic commentary, media commentary, and also comments from Lanzhou residents, I concluded that local leadership in Lanzhou lacked a coherent industrial renewal strategy and a committed and competitive policy activism towards this direction. So what may account for that leadership behavior? I mean, why Lanzhou leaders in Lanzhou, like Gansu provincial secretaries and Lanzhou city party secretaries, why they were, they adopted more complacent and conservative leadership style. Again, drawing on previous literature, I identified two particular factors that might explain their behavior. Their previous careers are, is a bit telling. They spent, especially, Lu Hao, Lu Wucheng, Yu Haiyan, all spent a large part of their careers in Lanzhou or other parts of Gansu. So their understanding of development, economic notions of them, quite probably were influenced deeply by the state-dominated economic structure of Lanzhou. That might have played a role in their conservative and complacent leadership style. Also, Wang Senyun, the party secretary of Gansu from 2011 to 2017, differs a bit from the other three. He came to Gansu after some positions in coastal provinces, so he knew that how the economy was working, how private entrepreneurs can be convinced from his experiences in wealthy coastal provinces like Fujian. However, when he came to Gansu, he was already 59 years old, and retirement age for the provincial level officials is 65. So he quite probably had no expectation for further promotion. So his career prospect may have influenced his behavior here. Also, for all of those leaders, we might remind an fact about the cadre promotion system in China. Actually, the chance of promotion is not quite high for provincial level leaders, especially. Staying in the same position, demotion, retirement, or lateral transfer to some other province is much more common than promotion. So it is understandable that why so many provincial leaders or prefectural level leaders are complacent about their economic performances. I mean, they of course give importance to promote economic growth, but they do not always follow some proactive and risk-taking choices in their strategy of economic development. Apart from the role of local factors, I like to underline the role of central government policies. First of all, macroeconomic policies, I argue, lessen the urgency of industrial transformation for the local leadership, because as a result of the investment-led growth model in China from early 2000s, the raw material intensive industries in Lanzhou or in other parts of China found a chance of high growth. And apart from this opportunity for the resource-intensive, resource-based industries, stimulus packages adopted after the 2008 crisis offered a new source of growth for localities in China. And because of the existence of this kind of growth sources, I argue local government might have been less motivated to follow an industrial transformation program. And also cadre promotion system, China's cadre promotion system could also affect the behavior of local leaders in Lanzhou. Because it is known that China's cadre promotion system rewards the visible achievements and this incentivizes risk-taking and path-creating leadership styles. This is a known fact, and there's a bias in China's cadre promotion system for short-term achievements. And of course, it is easier to record short-term economic growth through expanding existing industries than actively pushing a shift to more advanced sectors. But I like to underline that we should think these central level factors together with the local level factors. I mean, these central level factors did not result in same destinies for other cities. So combination of these central level factors with the local level factors resulted in a failure in Lanzhou. I'm moving to conclusions. My conclusion about the successful cases is a bit predictable. I say that industrial upgrading in Western China realized where there was a combination of central government support and successful competent local strategy. Or in other words, central government support to be translated to concrete outcomes needs competent and proactive leadership. Lanzhou also received some central support, like the establishment of the LNA. However, the leadership there failed to realize the potential. And also a few conclusions from Lanzhou. Quite clearly, as I already underlined, local leadership did a poor job in triggering industrial upgrading there. And I also argued that the local leadership's neglect of industrial upgrading was tolerated by central level factors. I listed already the macroeconomic policies, and we can say that, to be fair, the selection of local leaders in Lanzhou and Gansu, was not quite favorable. Lanzhou didn't have quite high-profile leaders with some strong ties with central bureaucracy or some strong track record. Also, I like to underline that these macroeconomic policies, these investment-led macroeconomic policies, these stimulus packages, may explain, I argue, why many cities opted for maintaining the old path. Many other cities in other parts of China, for instance, there are articles about Daqing and Ordos. They, similar to Lanzhou, they experienced an expansion in their industries, but after the their resource-based industries, but after the change in China's growth model since mid-2010s, those cities, I mean Daqing, Ordos, and Lanzhou, have now entered a downward economic trajectory. So I think this situation, I mean, this conclusion is extendable to other cities other than Lanzhou. Thanks for your patience.
Thank you very much, Veysel, for this very informative, very insightful presentation. Now we can start the Q&A session. And you can either write your questions and comments on the chat box, or anyone can also turn on their camera or a microphone and ask directly. So I can start with a question. So my question is whether there has been any efforts to link and integrate the Western Development Plan and the Belt and Road Initiative, because they are not so far from each other, right? Regionally, geographically. Sure. And that there is some sort of effort to link the Western China with Central Asia, etc. And related to that, so have there been efforts to support the economy of Gansu province and Lanzhou in particular by linking it to trade and investment related to BRI? And if there has been such efforts, have they failed?
Lanzhou, not unsurprisingly perhaps, already started some cargo train routes with some Central Asian countries. However, the success of these cargo train routes is a bit debatable. They started with sending a route for each week. Later, they stopped and they probably start sending a train for 3 weeks, for instance. So it is not quite successful, but there are some efforts, and also China, there is a strong petroleum processing industry in Lanzhou, and they try to make some cooperation with Iran. Iran has difficulties in securing advanced equipment for petrol drilling machines and machines like that. And in Lanzhou, there are some companies doing this sort of jobs, and they also, cooperate with Iran on this thing. However, if we compare, Belt and Road Initiative is first of all a scheme for increasing exports and FDI. In that sense, if you look at exports of Lanzhou after the initiation of Belt and Road Initiative in 2013, its export level, did not experience an increase, a dramatic increase. In that sense, Lanzhou still failed to exploit the potential coming with Belt and Road Initiative. I mean, cities and provinces with higher capacity are again positioned in a better place to exploit the opportunities with Belt and Road Initiative.
Yeah, thank you.
Okay, yeah. And I also have a question that, and have you ever compared the success of Xi'an to the failure of Lanzhou? Because as we know, these two cities are also in the northwest of China. But how could Xi'an develop successfully? However, Lanzhou failed.
Yeah, of course, this was a question in my mind throughout my fieldwork, and there was some, obvious factors that contributed to growth and success in Xi'an, such as being a larger city, such as having a great universities, and inheriting some electronic capacity in electronic sectors from the Maoist era. These conditions are not available in Lanzhou, and also some of Lanzhou's Xi'an's leaders are praised for their proactive search of foreign investment. Yeah, I could underline these three factors. I mean, the natural advantages, such as larger market, and the having great universities in Xi'an, and also the role of leadership. These are the answers I could find. Yeah.
Yeah, I also have another question. Because as before that, to be honest, the leadership in Xi'an or Shanxi was blamed as conservative, to be honest. I mean, according to my own experience.
Okay.
And also that, how to say that, for example, the Xi'an, some factor, but it's more focused on the low value. For example, some chemical industry factors, factories were built in Xi'an. But it was blamed for the corruption of the government. For example, they tried to finish their economic achievements, and then they let this factory to build in the Xi'an, but it was blamed by the people in Xi'an. So, have you ever considered the industrial development and also some sustainable development, this kind of relations, and the corruption of the government? I don't know whether I could express myself clearly.
I get it. You have two. Your question have two different parts. First of all, you ask about corruption, and you also underlined that some criticism towards the local leaders, such as being conservative and relying on some old traditional industries. But I shared the statistics from Lanzhou, Xi'an's industry, manufacturing industry, and according to those statistics, motor vehicles, communication equipment, and transportation equipment are the leading sectors in Xi'an. Even though there are some low-tech, low-end industries still in Xi'an, we can say that in a short span of time, from mid-2000s to mid-2010s, Xi'an shifted its industrial structure towards more advanced sectors. Coming to leaders, for instance, I want to give you an example. You know Zhao Leji?
Yeah.
Yeah, Zhao Leji was a party secretary of Shanxi from 2007 to 2012. And, Zhao Leji had some problems, but we don't have, Lanzhou and Gansu didn't have even that kind of leaders. Zhao Leji has certain advantages, like, he had a strong track record, and also he later promoted the central Politburo. He promoted the Politburo. So it seems that he did at least some things well. So please compare the differences. The difference between Shanxi and Xi'an. Xi'an and Gansu had even worse leaders. There is a difference between bad and worse. On the thing of corruption, corruption is interestingly, there are studies on the relationship between corruption and economic development. Sometimes they found correlation between corruption and economic development growth rates. Corruption is not inherently anti-developmental. This is the argument offered by some researchers, and petty corruption is all over the China, and also some recent research highlight the how to say corruption as an important motivation for promoting economic development. So the corruption and economic development can be done at the same time. This is the conclusion from some recent studies, and I agree with that.
Yeah, because I just want to give a small example. As we know, there was a plastic factory from Taiwan, and they want to build factory in Chengdu first, but it was not accepted by Chengdu. And then it moved to Xi'an, and Xi'an accepted this factory. But it resulted into some pollution problems, and it was blamed by people. And so it's a very interesting.
Yeah, that's a problem. But many inland cities still like to have this kind of polluting industries, because they, according to their understanding, their economic plans, their economic strategies, they need to attract investments, be made low-tech, be made polluting ones. For some in inland regions, they are still valuable.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you too.
Can I ask a question?
Sure.
Thank you very much, Veysel, and it was a really nice presentation. And I'm Erdemir from the sociology department.
I know you, Erdem hocam.
Yeah. So I have a question. Do you think that the Chinese central government has left Lanzhou to continue its low performance path? Do you think the government has intervened but failed? What do you think? What happened?
You mean which? Did you name a leader?
Yeah, the Chinese central leadership.
Did you use a private name, Longzhou or
Lanzhou?
Lanzhou.
Yeah.
No, he meant Lanzhou city, basically.
Lanzhou city. So sorry for my pronunciation.
Okay. Yeah. Sorry. Yes, central government, and you asked. Sorry for missing.
Yeah. So my question is whether the Chinese central government has left the city to continue its low performance path.
Okay.
It has intervened but failed. What happened?
Great. Actually, Lanzhou experienced a wide-scale anti-corruption campaign in 2016 or 2017 maybe. And now the latest party secretary of Gansu, Wang Senyun, arrested for corruption and bribery, and many other local officials are also, arrested for corruption. And interestingly, I checked the latest one, current party secretary in Gansu, and his profile differs from the previous one. He has a background in central bureaucracy, and he has a background in some wealthier provinces. So it seems that central government made an intervention through personnel appointment, at least. But, it is not easy to compel local governments to follow central directives. I mean, they are allowed to follow their own strategies, but broadly follow central government's directives. And because of this allowed improvisation, many localities in China are have to deal with wide-scale corruption and debt stocks, huge debt stocks, and many examples including like polluting industries, etc. So central government has a leverage over the localities, but they are allowed to follow their own strategies. I mean, by at the same time following central government strategies, but at the same time finding the concrete ways to promote development in their jurisdictions. So it is, at the end of the day, it is the responsibility and the ability or disability of the local government to promote economic development. Yeah, this is my answer. I hope it is helpful.
Oh. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Other questions or comments?
I can maybe ask a question, if possible.
Yeah.
Hi, Veysel. Thanks for this very informative presentation. I really enjoyed it.
Mm-hmm. Thank you.
I am curious how you see the Lanzhou case in the context of China's local governance in general. The Chinese local governments, like city-level governments, are often dubbed as neoliberal entrepreneurial states in the literature. So Lanzhou doesn't look like so, right? Do you think this entrepreneurial state is an overgeneralization, or cities like Lanzhou, Daqing, or those are outliers for their own particular reasons? How do you see, in general, China's local or city-level state?
Okay, actually, one can easily find some evidence to support the existence of neoliberal type entrepreneurial state in Lanzhou. And it commodified, I mean, the government commodified large rural areas. And, you know, Lanzhou area is itself a real estate project at the same time. Now, there are thousands of empty blocks in Lanzhou area, and they commodified the rural land, and they constructed buildings. And after the establishment of Lanzhou area, local government transferred some heavy industries, some factories in heavy industry to Lanzhou area, and by this way they gained a new land in the city center, quite, you know, profitable land. So indeed, by following their footsteps in how to say, real estate, we can easily say they are, I mean, the experience in Lanzhou is an instance of neoliberal entrepreneurialism. But in terms of industry, you know, I focused more on large-scale enterprises. But yeah, I think it's a key part of neoliberal entrepreneurialism, if I'm not wrong, right? I mean, the commodification of land and booming real estate sector is a key part of neoliberal entrepreneurialism. If we say so, so Lanzhou is also a case of that trend.
Okay, fair enough. I guess you're saying it is also like the other local city-level governments, but it's an unsuccessful one. Point well taken. Thank you.
Yeah, in terms of at least industrial upgrading and you know, in terms of forging close ties with foreign investors as well as foreign markets.
Thank you.
But many people made fortunes on this, you know, real estate sector in Lanzhou. So, yeah.
Other questions? Comments? I have a question on Guiyang, your case of success.
Uh-huh.
I mean, can you further elaborate on the development of this big data industry there? I mean, to what extent it is due to Guiyang's ecological, geographical conditions? Like, is it a case of pure luck? It's like your geographical advantage, because you may explain, right? There are interesting reasons behind that location, not due to Guiyang's superior infrastructure or, quality of its labor force, but there are other factors, I guess.
Definitely. Yeah, the part of the story is luck, yes, because Guiyang has an high altitude and cool climate, which is quite good for servers. And this was one of the factors, but it was itself local government that suggested this industry to central government. So again, local leadership play a role here. And apart from this geographical natural advantages and the local leadership, central government sent Chengdu, as I already underlined. But apart from that guy, we have some other strong figures as party leaders in Guizhou. For instance, Li Jianshu. He is a protege of Xi Jinping, and he was the party secretary in Guizhou from 2010 to 2012. And we also have Zhao Keji. He is now promoted to Ministry of Public Security and State Council. I mean, this kind of high-level leaders, which close ties with the Xi Jinping leadership, seem to have played a role as well. And convincing Huawei, convincing Tencent to make huge investments there probably involve some suggestion from central government, I would say. So one can find some other places like Guiyang, maybe with high altitude, with a cool climate, with low energy cost, but there are something more to Guiyang's story, which is related to this kind of leadership ties.
Thank you. Other questions or comments? Maybe we can now wrap it up. So Veysel, thank you very much for this excellent presentation. And I also would like to thank all participants very much for attending the webinar and asking very, interesting questions. And we'll continue our seminars, with new talks, and we are going to announce them via our website and social media accounts. So stay in touch. Thanks so much.
Thank you.